Hello, hello. Welcome to The Play That Changed My Life, a podcast brought to you by Harbinger Theater and OSM Studios. Happy New Year! We have a super-sized Play That Changed My Life today. I'm very happy to welcome three of the giants of Capital Region Theater. Sitting to my right here is Owen Smith. He's the artistic director of Playhouse Stage and title in Cahoe's Music Hall.
Same thing. It's one title that covers them all. Yeah.
Yes, he is the head honcho, the grand poobah. Owen Smith, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And to his right is Aaron Holbritter, artistic director of Creative License. Hello, Aaron.
Hello. How are you?
Welcome. I'm great. Thanks for coming. And to my left is Tony Pallone, director of 100 Saints You Should Know at Schenectady Civic Players. Right. Hello, Tony.
Hello.
Hello.
An artistic director of anything, but I'm on a couple boards.
Hey. Yeah, well, there you go. What are you, couple?
Yeah, Theater Voices and Creative Action Unlimited.
There you go. There you go. So usually we start off with a bitine of news, and sometimes we talk about, trends that are going on in theater or, what's happening around the country. But today we've got some news this morning right in our own backyard. It was announced today that Maggie Mancinelli Cahill is stepping down as artistic director of Capitol Repertory Theater, the Rep, where she has been artistic director for 30 years. Directed, I'm going to screw this up, 115 productions. She's written 8 productions that have gone on the road with the On the Go series. She's made 10,000 curtain speeches. We all know Maggie and love her, and I just want to throw it out to the guys here as far as their reactions to the news this morning. The first post I saw on Facebook, 6:30 this morning, was Tony Pallone, and he announced that Maggie was stepping down.
Yeah. I had a little bit of an inside track because I one of the things I do is I work at the Times Union, so I had heard about it before the news went out to the public, but I was, sworn to secrecy. And but when I saw that it was ready to post at 6 a.m. this morning, and I just happened to be up, I thought, I'm going to be the harbinger.
Well done.
And, well done. Yeah, big. To say it's big news is an understatement.
Yeah, you've worked there a number of times.
A few times, yeah.
Yeah. Aaron.
I think that that the influence that Maggie's had on theater in this area is, I don't think you can really quantify it, right? And I think that's amazing. And I think of all the amazing shows that I've seen at Cap Rep over the 30 years, one of which will be my answer to the final question.
Oh, hey now.
Little teaser.
Yeah, a little teaser.
So stay tuned. Stay tuned. Everybody listen up for the next hour.
But also, 30 years is a long time to be in charge of anything. Yeah. And I'm very happy to see that there appears to be a succession in plan. I think the bigger fear for me was that, as it would continue on, that it would kind of, falter. So I hope
possibly fill those.
Right. When you get somebody who's a little bit outsized in their position, you worry a little bit. So I'm very glad to see that it looks like they have a succession plan in place, and we can count on 30, 40 more years of Cap Rep production. So I think that's important.
Yeah. Owen, who just celebrated 15 years at the helm of Playhouse Stage, you got some ways to go.
Yeah, I mean, if the going rate on artistic directors is 30, then I'm halfway there, and that makes me sad because I'd like to do it much longer. But I'm sure, like Maggie, at some point I'll want to take a break. But here's what I would say is, the measure of any endeavor that you get involved with is do you leave a place, do you leave an organization better than you found it? And I don't think that there's anyone with a thinking brain in their body that wouldn't say that Maggie Mancinelli Cahill left not just Capitol Repertory Theater better than she found it, but also the Capital Region Theater community better than she found it. It's obviously very physically evident just when you walk into that beautiful new building. Being part of a capital campaign like that over so many years and having a vision and then executing it in such a way that, when I first walked into the new Cap Rep as opposed to 95 Pearl or whatever it was, North Pearl, it's sort of similar, right? You walk in and there's the organizational identity of Cap Rep is present in how the theater is configured and how you sort of welcome yourself into this space, walk into this space. And look, that's her, right? She had a vision for how she wanted their productions to be conceived and perceived, and she's just achieved it over and over again. And it's a hell of a track record. I should be so lucky. Any of us should be so lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was talking with Paul Grandal this morning. Oops, I dropped a name there. and he said, hey, there's job opening this morning. I said, no, thank you, sir. What she has done for Capital Rep and the Capital Region, theater in the Capital Region, two of the greatest loves of my life. And because of what she has done, she will always be, close to my heart because, I've just enjoyed so much time attending there and the number of performances, and her friendship. She's always so warm and gracious and, and she's supportive. She has come out and she's seen a number of my shows. I can click them off in my head and I'm like, oh, thank you. And she's, made lovely, gracious, generous comments to me throughout the years. But she's always, she's on the craft board, and she's pitching in. She, along with Owen, one of the first people to step up when I started devising the Capital Region Festival of Theater. So just endless gratitude, admiration, respect, love. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But like you guys hit upon, she has certainly left the organization in a fine manner and going out on a high note. Beautiful last summer was fantastic. I somehow didn't make my top 10 list, but only because I was juggling 290 productions. But she's directing a Layman trilogy. When I saw that announced, I was like, how are they going to do that? That's going to be amazing. And she's directing Once this summer. But yeah, a job really well done, extraordinarily well done. Thank you, Maggie.
Thank you, Maggie.
Yeah, and there are so many plays that have, to me, there's any number of things that you could point to, but one of the things from her time that she created that is her legacy that I hope whomever it is that steps into that role continues is Next Act, is this wonderful engine that helps to create fresh new theater here in the Capital Region, like Harbinger is doing.
Yeah.
But does it in such a way that gives the shows then a production life, right? You sort of have this summer reading and whatever stands out amongst the pack gets a full production. To me, that's just, that's because, that's really putting your money where your mouth is with new works, she really investing in them.
She doesn't get enough credit for that.
Yeah,
and,
I agree.
Next Act has been, a great, incubator of new plays, and that she would give up a slot on the schedule for the past 10 years, and when we've all been in board meetings or play selection committees, and we all talk about the play that's going to make your license to print money. We need the title that has that is going to ring in the public's ears. We need the
name recognition.
And to commit to new work and sell it. You know, you gotta get out there and sell it. She's done that for 10 years now, and you know, you can look at regional theaters across the country who don't have that commitment. Yeah, fantastic.
Also, too, I think it's important to mention too how supportive Maggie has been of the community theater community. Right?
Yeah.
I think it's really, in a lot of ways, her prerogative on how she views sort of the non-professional competition.
Yeah.
And the fact that I think she's chosen not to view it that way at all, and to embrace it and embrace that the more theater there is, the more people who are going to come to the theater. I think that's been really, really great just for the entire theater community.
100%. 100%. She's always been supportive of everything I've done throughout, you know, the capital region.
A rising tide lifts all boats.
There you
There it
go.
is.
There you go. Just had to throw that in there.
No, it's great. I love it.
Tony Pallone aphorism,
Yes,
folks.
there you
That's
go.
what we-
Thank you very much. Thank you. Didn't write it myself.
It's okay. And we had another piece of news, but it was last week that Oklahoma is...
Jeez, I forgot. That feels like a really long time ago. Probably
This
because
news cycle, you know,
Right?
Capital Region Theater News.
It's
you gotta,
crazy.
there's a lot going on.
you gotta stay with it.
Yeah, we
You miss a
did-
little, you miss a lot.
Yeah. We announced Oklahoma as the show for not just Park Playhouse for a month, and then a weekend encore at Tawasentha Park like we did last year with Marvelous Wonderettes. That's going to be an ongoing thing now, sort of taking
cool.
our free outdoor theater to another corner of Albany County in the capital region. Oklahoma is a show that people ask for every year because it's Oklahoma. It's universally known. You know, last year was a challenging year for us, and you know, having the entire left side of the stage knocked down the day that Marvelous Wonderettes was supposed to open didn't help. We tried doing things a little differently schedule wise, but I got to give a lot of credit to Kathy Sheehan and to the city of Albany because, you know, Park Playhouse, the free theater program, has been without city funding for 15 years now. The city funded it my first year on the job, and my second year on the job, this is before the Sheehan administration, I learned that there was not going to be a city arts grant program anymore. And, you know, we lost a similar amount of annual funding as did CapRep, as did the Symphony, as did the Palace, and so on. The difference was we were, at that time, operating on just about a $300,000 annual budget to produce a free summer musical. All of those other organizations were year-round entities that were operating on $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million or more, you know? So it was apples to apples in terms of the total amount, but apples to oranges in terms of the ratio to your budget. The other obvious difference is we're giving our stuff away for free as a community service to get people engaged with the live performing arts during the summer. And so I think, as municipalities often do, they cut with a hatchet instead of a scalpel, right? And it was challenging, but we were able to get through it by way of some, you know, big corporate sponsorships and getting out in the community and telling our story. That became much more challenging after COVID. You know, we lost a couple of key sponsorships last year that amounted to nearly $75,000 of funding just gone because all of a sudden organizations understandably want to give money to health and human services causes, which in the wake of a global pandemic, you get it, right? But the nonprofit regional arts world needs support too. It's just part of the reality of doing this work in this country is that we need corporate sponsors and philanthropists to step up to support our work to pay artists, right? So this year we were able to have a really productive discussion with Mayor Sheehan about how much the climate has changed, quite literally losing half as many performances to rain in the last decade than we did in the decade before, and just the uncertainties of the corporate fundraising world, and essentially just made the case that, look, we think this is worth the city getting behind financially, and she agreed that it was part of the fabric of summers in Albany, and the city agreed to resume funding it at the level they had been, you know, back before we lost that funding. Yes. Of course, I look at it and I say, well, gosh, if we had never lost that funding, we'd be in such a different place financially. But I choose to think really optimistically and say, well, now where will we be 15 years hence, right? Where will we be if we can keep this funding in place, and if the city stays behind it, we'll be in a very different place financially in a few years. But Oklahoma got a good response from folks. We had auditions this past weekend, and, you know, just on the local call side, it's like if you want to see the strength of Capital Region Theater, you know, where we are at as a community right now, 176 people auditioned.
Awesome.
over a 3-day period. it, and that doesn't count the, somewhere between 500 and 700 video submissions that we've received from outside of the area of people that want to come here and work. So I think that's a ringing endorsement for how much energy there is behind this community, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. On a smaller scale, I mean, Aaron's doing Few Good Men, which has how many?
We have 16.
16.
It's more than a few.
It's more than a few.
15.
One of them is a woman, so
15 men and a diverse cast. Yep. And I know Ellen Cribbs said to me, she was casting Pillow Man. She goes, "What am I going to do?" He's
Where are
got
all the
15 men. And I went to the first night of Pillow Man audition. She had 20 men show up.
That's great.
Half of whom I did not know. And
we did our auditions for this show back in
May
of right. I mean, it was a while.
Yeah.
Specifically because I knew that if we wait too long, a show that has this much of a specific kind of requirement really needs a lot of attention paid when you're casting it. You know, and creative license, we use sort of a repertory company in a lot of ways, so we use the same people over and over. But we didn't have 16 people in our roster to, you know what I mean? We knew that we were going to have to hold an open audition, and the turnout for that audition was fantastic.
It's all great stuff, and hopefully everyone who auditions keeps at it and finds another venue, finds another opportunity, because there are plenty out there. But last summer, when you did a great thing last year. Your pivot with Marvelous Wonderettes and opening up to Towasentha Park, which my sister loved, and she's going to be back to Oklahoma, which is how I judge, theater in the capital region. My sister loved it. So,
tough crowd.
I feel that I have family members that are my age as well. Like,
she's the one who turns to me and says, Patrick, theater's not really a thing. So I know when it gets to Megan loved it, I know that we're doing something right. But and you opened Legally Blonde in the Playhouse, which was phenomenal.
Yeah. Well, we did that. I mean, we're sticking with that model of having one outdoor show that allows us to run it a little bit longer, and having one or really two shows if you include the youth show that happens at Cahoe's Music Hall. Part of the reason for that is obviously financial, but there's also, as you guys know, student training is a huge part of what we do. I was a student in this program growing up, and so I've doubled down over and over again as I've been in the leadership position to try to make sure that we're giving local kids an opportunity to perform, which when you look at 2013 Secret Garden, I was extraordinarily proud of the work that these young people did to put together a beautiful production, and they got to perform it maybe about half of the time that it was scheduled. That was one that truly got hit by half of them were canceled due to weather. And I thought to myself, this is no way to run a program. You know what I mean? At some point, yes, the rehearsals and in fact the workshops that are completely disconnected from the rehearsals, that's the program, right? But getting that opportunity to perform a little bit longer than they get to at their school, learning how to sustain a show, learning how to find interest, 3 or 4 weeks in, as opposed to just doing a weekend of performances, it's really good experience. And they were being robbed of that by Mother Nature. So it just made all the sense in the world. So, this summer, the same thing. Little Mermaid going to be taking place at the music hall. It'll have a handful of adult professionals in it, and then the rest of the folks are young teens, I should say, from this region, getting a chance to perform alongside those professionals and getting the chance to make sure that they can perform their show for that full month without getting rainouts and stuff like that.
So with this city funding, we've got the best of both worlds.
Yes. Yeah. A bigger show in the park where we can take a little bit more risk on a larger cast and a larger band, because we know we have the wind at our back of the city's funding, while still having another show at the music hall that isn't going to get canceled no matter what Mother Nature throws our way. he says as he knocks on it.
Would be an earthquake,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Who knows? I mean, for God's sake, I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
really, mother.
Yeah.
I mean, look, and I think it's important in a way that we stop and acknowledge right now the other big piece of news in the entertainment world, which is what's happening in Los Angeles. And, without getting too far down a rabbit hole here, I think probably if any of us 35 years ago, 40 years ago, thought we'd be talking about, when Park Playhouse was first founded, that we would having to be pivoting because more than half the shows are getting canceled in some years. It seems unthinkable, but it's the world we're living in.
I still don't.
Just the last year, was it last year that you had, or 2 years ago that you had cancellations because of the wildfires?
Right.
That's not something that
right.
I've ever heard of.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Not something that ever
Certainly
happened.
in this area, So like calculating that part of it in, I think has to be.
I read about a lot of cancellations out in Oregon, Shakespeare Festival, but I haven't really seen the attention given to outdoor theater and what's going on. And, they have this renovation of the Delacorte in Central Park, which is delayed, but that's just construction, I think. But I haven't really seen a focus on that in the way in which you addressed it and stepped up and took action and, came up with this plan. But yeah, it's like these are different times.
Yeah. And in this line of work, right, I mean, we're all operating no matter what level, whether it's Cap Rep and Proctors with their budget, whether it's us, whether it's community theaters, whether it's schools, it's like we're all operating on some sort of shoestring at some level, right? And it's like, so you control the controllables. I can't control the weather, but I can control what venue each show performs at. You know what I mean? So, And look, I think that there were some people who were disappointed to see that there was only going to be one show in the park, and we heard that from some people. I would remind people that for the first, not the first 2 years of Park Playhouse in 89 and 90, there were 2 shows each summer. But then for about 12 years after that, it was just one show that would run through the summer. Obviously, eventually they started doing a pre-show youth production, all that kind of stuff. I grew up doing that. But we feel we are 100% committed to being in the capital city, in Albany, during the summer months. I will say that if Mayor Sheehan had said no, we made it clear to her that we weren't there with an ultimatum. We weren't going to leave Albany. Not that it's in our, for God's sake, the lake house is our logo, even though we're at the music hall in Cohoes 10 months out of the year. But it would have just had to change our programming profile. If we couldn't secure that city funding, we probably would have had to rethink again whether it was the number of weeks or the style of show or whatever the case may be. And we don't want to do that. So think about more than 2 million people have enjoyed a show for free at Park Playhouse in Albany since 1989. And I think of the kid who, walks up not knowing what's going on and sees that there's a show going on and sits down, right? And becomes a lifelong fan of theater. And that may sound like pie in the sky. It's really not. I mean, I can tell you the number of people who have ended up working there who came and saw a show and didn't know what was going on or got dragged along by their parents and just became enamored with this art form, right? And it's because it's totally accessible. So super important to keep it going, super important that it stays in the capital city, but to the extent that we can bring it to Towasentha and get a little bit of funding for that, to the extent that we can have other shows at an indoor venue that's a little bit more sustainable environmentally, those are the things that we're going to do to help make sure that we can keep delivering free theater every summer.
Awesome.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, fantastic. Tony,
Can't
we're
follow
all
that. I don't
we're all local guys. I'm gonna pivot. Yeah. So we're all local guys, right? We all grew up here. Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up here.
Colony
Yes.
Colony High School, line and Q.
Colony High School, yes.
So, when you were wandering through the park, or what was your park story? No, what attracted you to performing or theater? Do you?
Well, it's funny you mentioned Line and Q, and I really wasn't a member of Line and Q because back in high school, I was kind of afraid of my own shadow. I just was not a confident person. Very different from the person I am today. And in fact, I remember going to there was an after-school bus to go to a meeting of Line and Q, and I don't know, somebody gave me a dirty look or something, and I was like, okay, I'm leaving. I'm not going to do this. So but it was something that I had always been interested in. It wasn't until I got to college, Union College, that I actually managed to really step foot on a stage. And so, what was the question?
What attracted you to
What
performing?
attracted me?
Or so you're at Union College.
Yeah.
And you're going to work up the nerve to audition? Or
Yeah.
take a class or?
To audition. I'm trying to remember the first one I auditioned for. Ultimately, I was a Mad Hatter in a very adult version of Alice in Wonderland. And
I saw one of those.
Hey now.
I'm not kidding.
That was
It was a burlesque version.
Haven't we all? I mean,
Brooklyn.
haven't we all?
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
rite of passage.
Yeah.
I think that the fact that I was sort of uncomfortable in my own skin, I saw this life. I would just, watch television shows. I would sometimes see plays, and I saw this as a chance to explore another skin, another self,
yeah.
another being.
Yeah.
Right. And that really appealed to me because I wasn't comfortable with who I was. And amazingly, some years later, having gotten to explore a number of other, skins, if you will, I'm now more comfortable in my own skin, way more comfortable in my own skin. So I think those two things are absolutely related.
I identify with that very strongly. Yeah, thinking back on, the teenage years or when, you're attracted to theater and performing. I mean, I was always, I don't know, I was a little freaky kid as far as playing with action figures and stuff. I tried the sports, but, I didn't really have the coordination or, but I had the imagination, and I was always like attracted to I don't know, like I thought there were casting calls. Like I thought I was going to be cast as something like you hear Michael Landon's looking for and I was always thinking like that's the role for me. I don't know. I never did theater until 11th grade, but I
actually just reminded me, I didn't really know you could go off to college and study theater.
Yeah.
Because I had heard things like, well, James Dean got discovered in a drugstore. And I thought that's how it had to happen, right? That's how you become a star or something like that. But it's just happenstance.
Yeah,
I didn't know you could do that.
My guidance counselor in high school was also the high school basketball coach, and he couldn't find a state school that had a theater program.
Wow. Times have changed.
I was very, I had a very sort of specific view of when I was young, what local theater would be, right? So for me, it was, this was the early 90s. I was probably like 19, 20, and my friend and I were driving on Route 7 in Raymortown. I grew up out in Pittstown, so nearby, and there was a sign for a production for Highlight Acting Troupe, and they were doing on Golden Pond, and my friend and I laughed because we thought, I bet it's going to be so bad, right? Because our presumption was that if it wasn't professional, then it must be terrible. So we decided we were going to get tickets. And we were going to go and we were going to have such a good time making fun of this local production. It was so good. It was like the set, first of all, walking in, and there was this beautiful set of the cabin that you were immediately transported to like a main woods cabin, lake cabin. And that sort of blew me away. And then all of the performances, I can't remember specifically who was in it. There were a couple people whose names you might know, but I can't remember right now. The performances were so good. And that just completely was like, oh. And I immediately auditioned for the next Highlight Acting Troupe show. And that was like my first community theater
I love that
production. Because I just, it was that presumption that if it's not professional,
Right.
if it's not, it's no good.
Yeah.
And understanding that it's about the commitment and the work that the people put into it.
Yeah.
That is what makes it good.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, I go to highlight acting troupe Nicole Osterhout. He's doing a fantastic job out there.
Yeah, they're still going. They're still going out there.
Yeah, I saw, and then there were none, and there were 10 people on that stage. And I was like, hello. Yeah, but it was great. It was great. I love going out there and seeing people get opportunities and, fulfill themselves, and it offers live entertainment, and the place was packed. You can't.
I think that the viewpoint that you suggest there is something that is, you were a kid just having a laugh, right? But I think that for a lot of people who aren't necessarily enrolled in going to theater as an ongoing hobby or a passion, they think that way. They think, well, if it's not professional, and when they say professional, they mean Broadway, right? Like that's
right.
If they think like, well, if it's not Broadway theater, it's probably not that good. There are some people who wouldn't think to go see an off-Broadway show when they were in New York because it's not a Broadway show, right? It's not the pinnacle. And isn't it funny the way people, you think about athletics, right? Every professional sports league has some sort of developmental league or farm system all across this country, and all of those, minor league and developmental professional sports teams drive ticket sales in their region. They drive people out to restaurants and bars in their region. Our work is no different. It is a development where it's like, where do you think those people who ended up on Broadway came from?
Yeah.
Right.
They didn't just land there. That's not how it happens anymore. They have some sort of background in the performing arts. And, we have countless people, not just from our program, but from all sorts of corners of the capital region who have gone on to wonderful success in the professional theater world, including Broadway, and national tours and, film and television. And I hope that through craft, through the Capital Region Festival of Theater, you think about what are the outcomes that we all hope come from creating something like that. And I constantly give you credit for driving the bus on this. One of the things that I really hope it does is that it illuminates to those folks that are generally unexposed to our companies and to the local work happening, that it just wakes them up to the wealth of opportunities, and that they go and see, even if you get one person to go see one thing, you might spark a lifelong belief that, there's great entertainment here almost 7 nights a week, and you don't have to get on the Amtrak and go down to New York City. You don't have to, pay an arm and a leg to go see a really good piece of theater.
There are a number of things, when I'm looking at Broadway, it's like, I can't go to O Mary or Othello or Good Night and Good Luck. It's like it is not accessible.
Yeah.
And if it's not accessible to me, I'm like, who is going to, keep this going?
Right.
But
your disposable income is spent on theater.
Yeah,
and if it's too expensive for you, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like there are people, and that's why I've always said that the free part of what we do, to me, it's like it's creating the means by which to convince people to spend their disposable income on theater. And I think that that's gotten only more important in a time when we're all walking around with devices in our pockets that have the entire catalog of recorded film and television available to us like that on demand.
Right.
So we really need to keep enrolling people in going to the theater, because there is a dynamic difference between watching something on a screen. I'm a huge film guy. I'm a huge TV guy. I'm sure we all are, but not most of us. But you don't have a TV.
I used to be.
But in any
Get
event,
rid of your TV.
Oh, yeah.
Wow, good for
November 9th, 2016.
Wow, you rattled that off like my father rattled off the day he quit smoking.
Trump's election.
there you
that'll
go.
do it, yeah.
Hey, that's
First election.
Yeah. But in the long story short, though, is that people have more choice than ever. And we just lived through a period of time where for at least, roughly 12 months to 18 months, people were told to stay home and found entertainment otherwise. I'm sure we've all experienced that sort of rebuilding of our audience. It's kind of back to where you want it to be now, which is good. But people have a ton of choice. We need to make sure that they understand the dynamic difference between going and seeing a live piece of entertainment where people are breathing the same air as you, they're performing right in front of you, and there's that dynamic connection between performer and audience member. For us, that's why, before we get anywhere near the summer, we have Schoolhouse Rock Live that we're doing for a month of school field trips. And I'm glad to say, it's sold more the tickets. We sell them. They're very, very cheap, but we just want schools to bring kids to get in and get exposed to the arts. We got more coming than we ever had in our history of doing tours or field trips. So hopefully that's a good sign that there are still plenty of educators in the region who really get the importance of exposing kids when they're young to this live performing art form,
Yeah, well, I hope so. Yeah. Another mark on the value of live performance is Wicked sold $5 million in tickets last week. No Broadway show has ever sold $5 million in tickets. And one, how much are these tickets going for? But that everyone goes to see the movie once, twice, 3 times, and then goes to see the musical for a lot of money.
It's funny too, because I think that there's always been sort of a reverse thinking about that when it comes to Broadway shows.
Chicago's still running.
That, right. This idea that if a show is popular on Broadway, you can't have a movie and a show on stage at the same time, because if people can see the movie, then they won't go and see the show.
Well, isn't that the thinking behind publishing rights?
100%. Totally.
When amateur companies cannot get the rights for a period of time after they're available because they reserve them for the professional companies. But then, even so, a professional company cannot do it at the same time as Broadway, which is
if
2.5 hours
on Broadway.
away.
Right, exactly. I mean, I don't know if they keep the same rules the farther away you get from New York.
There's an element.
It depends.
Yeah. Like, I always wondered if, because there have been times, in fact, for A Few Good Men, there'd been some discussion about a restaging on Broadway a few years ago. So we were just like, I wonder where we're at with that and if that'll affect the rights. Luckily, it didn't. And that doesn't seem to be going forward right now. But you can see it at Co's Musical.
Well, and that's a good example too of a piece that, yes, there's this famous movie, right? It's Aaron Sorkin's sort of debut piece, but it's part of the sort of cultural, fabric, right? That scene, just Jack Nicholson in that one scene in the courtroom at the end, right, is part of the cultural fabric.
What, does he have a line in there that people know?
I don't think you can handle it, but in any event, I think that there's intrigue then, right? Too, it's been long enough since that movie was out there winning awards, and I think to see a fresh take on it, to see it live, creates intrigue. So it's always a balancing act, right? When you're picking seasons, it's like wanting to do stuff that people are aware of because in many cases that's what they respond to, but at the same time desperately wanting to get them out to see new stuff and stuff that they're not familiar with, because otherwise we don't have new American theater. We don't have new theater, period, if we're not getting people out to see new stuff.
But also, I mean, the greatest thrills in theater are when you haven't experienced something, that something has happened before you, fresh, and that you did not expect coming, on Golden Pond, or a story that you're encountering for the first time and you don't know what's going to happen next. So that can't happen with a piece that you've already experienced
for sure
from a different medium, or it can in ways that in staging,
certainly in staging and in ways. I hope that we give the audience a couple of moments where they go,
no.
That's
I take that back. I take that back.
No, I understand what you were saying though, like and in an ideal world, like you want to have a little bit of all of that available to a local audience. You want people to be able to go and see stuff that is cozy and familiar to them, and hopefully while they think they're going to something cozy and familiar, hopefully it subverts their expectations in some way. And then you also want to have them seeing stuff that is, truly fresh because it's never been produced before, and right now in the capital region, we've got a good balance of all of that. We really do.
Yeah.
And I genuinely hope, when you do something like Oklahoma, again, going back to it, it's like everybody has heard of that. It essentially is the thing that was the springboard for the modern American musical. And I hope that lots of people come see it because they've heard of it and whatever. And I hope that it inspires them to open their playbill, look at all these other companies that are advertising their stuff in our playbill or whose stuff we have listed or whatever, and go take a chance, spend a few bucks, go see a piece of local live theater because it will surprise you. In some of the performances in Maggie May, when I came and saw your Maggie May this past fall, there were some people up there who I was seeing for the first time, and what a delight to see some new actors who, of course, I can't help myself but think like, oh, what could they do for her? Like, but like,
For sure.
but truly, like to get this sense of like, oh, we've all been in this room. There's a lot of years of Capital Region theater experience, and yet it still feels like we're only scratching the surface of what's possible and what's possible for individual people who you see grow over the years and develop, and companies who are coming up and redefining themselves. And it's an exciting time to be part of all of this.
Everybody was talking about Cast Party, the benefit we threw for craft. Owen was instrumental. Owen through the Cast Party.
It was awesome.
And we sold 391 tickets, and everyone came out like, oh, it was so great seeing so many. That's just a small fraction of Capital Region Theater.
Agreed. And I'll tell you what, I appreciate you saying that, and I was glad to do it. We were glad to do it, the whole Playhouse team, but it really was a communal effort. The number of people that were like volunteering their time as performers, as volunteers just behind the scenes at the event, people setting up auctions and all that. A lot of causes raise a lot of money in the Capital Region, and some of them are very easy, right? It's like the Heart Ball. Of course we're going to support that, right? Dancing in the Woods. Of course we're going to support something that supports the local children's hospital, right? But, again, fundraising in the arts it can be a challenging story to tell. And what a cool thing that for the first major fundraiser for this local initiative to shine a light on our theater community, the theater community did it ourselves. We raised $15,000 out of pretty much all of our own pockets. And I give credit to the people in the room that were there because they're art supporters more than artists themselves. But a lot of that 15 grand that we raised that night came from the blood, sweat, and tears, and indeed the pockets of the people that are creating local theater 12 months out of the year. That's a pretty cool thing. You don't see that every day, and what a cool way to launch this project.
Yeah. And I feel, the Capital Region Theater, as it has grown and, gotten bigger and more adventurous and taken more risks and, come up with a cast of 16 or, done new work that it's because of all of us, supporting each other that this is, growing by our own interest. And that's what the festival is about, is to show, how great we are, but also, to show it to each other, like, you didn't know this company or this person, or, we don't know, how deep and wide and, special we actually are. And, we need to take a look at it, and it should inspire us to, risk more and go further and, So, 100 Saints You Should Know.
Yes.
Tell us about it.
You should know. That's a great example of a piece of work that's relatively new and that people may not have heard of. It's a story about finding something to believe in. We have a young priest who's questioning his calling, and he's been looking at some really adult kind of pictures, nudes from the 1930s. George Platt Lyons, who did these incredible photographs from the 1930s that were way ahead of their time. And he's starting to question, what is it like? What does it mean for me to live this like lonely celibate existence? Is this really what I want for my life? And then there's a young woman who's working as a cleaning woman. She feels she's made nothing of her life. She has a daughter that she, had got pregnant when she was in high school, and the daughter is sort of, troubled now, and she's kind of looking for the faith, hoping that the priest can help her, but he's kind of questioning his own thing, right? And it puts them sort of on a wow, edit that part out, yeah, trajectory. To a sort of tragic accident that's in the center of the play that kind of shakes everybody's faith. So you'll just have to come and see it. But I will say we've got a very cool tree that looks like it's made of stained glass, and that figures into the accident. So yeah,
excellent
plot point.
Fantastic.
When do you play?
January 24th through February 2nd.
Awesome.
Schenectady Civic.
Awesome.
And who's in your cast?
So I've got 5 people in the cast. 3 of them are brand new to the Schenectady Civic stage, which is very cool. Alex Yoon, Jake Herder, and Zuri Adams are the 3 new people. And then we have Brigitte Rose and Maureen Omond. Yeah. So it's a really great cast. I mean, every one of them is just, so well perfect for their character. And like you said, I've got some really inventive set design, lighting design. So it's really exciting to be a part of this.
Yeah, I peeked at it. The tree was stunning.
Yeah.
You showed us the picture before. It's really, really
I was
incredible.
floored when he sent me that because I had only seen it without the lights on it. And I was like, okay, I get where
Boy,
we're going. And then he put the lights on. I was like, oh, my God.
So,
Right. It's awesome.
yeah.
Who designed it? Robin?
Robin designed the tree. And
Robin
then,
McDuffie.
yeah, and then David Z did the lighting. Yeah.
Wow.
Zwirinkin.
I wasn't going to say it because I wasn't.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm sorry,
Rankin.
David, if I've just...
David, call in to the show and make sure we know how to pronounce your name.
he
Zwirinkin.
did the set design for Moon for the Misbegotten.
Yes, that's right, yes.
Which was phenomenal. And he works for Proctor's Collaborative.
Yes.
And donated to the Craft Festival. Yeah, he donated... a rental, $200 rental to the Craft Festival, which Laura Darling scooped up and used for a bicycle into the breeches.
Nice.
Proctor's Collaborative has a huge warehouse of rentable furniture.
Yep.
We're
We're going to use one of those in our show.
Yeah, it's great resource. Great place to visit.
And
David
and
I don't
Laura-
know if they encourage that. Just walking. Hey,
Little window shopping.
yeah.
Right. David and Laura Darling are 2 of the recipients of the Nikki Lights kind of estate. When Nikki passed away. What was it, about a year ago?
Just over
Just
a year
ago. Yeah, and he had all this amazing equipment, and fortunately, it's not just sitting in a warehouse somewhere. It's really being used to continue making theater. I'm sure Nikki would want it that way.
Yeah, for sure.
And David is one of those people that's using a lot of that equipment.
There's a Facebook group, Lights Legacy, which is also training people to
that's great.
work in the technical arts.
That is definitely something that this local theater community needs is more designers and more people who are leading to that side of. I mean, look, we all love the actors. We love them. You gotta have them, but lighting designers and set designers and
I mean, we are very, very. We would tell our kids all the time, if you're going to go to school for theater, that's great. If you're not going to go to school for theater, that's great. But whatever, if you want to have a life in the theater, find yourself one design medium that speaks to you and pursue that as well. Because, we all hear this, like my human job, my survival job, whatever you want to call it, my civilian job, I've heard some people refer to it as. If that can also be in theater and be dedicated to the thing that you love so much, it makes a big difference in your quality of life. Not to mention it makes a big difference in your opportunities to be seen. I mean, when I was working in New York, before I returned to the region, I worked at Theater for a New Audience as their associate GM. And a guy who had been a bookkeeper at Tifana for 8 years auditioned and got cast as one of the witches when they did Macbeth at the Duke on 42nd Street. He had just been a bookkeeper for 8 years, but he knew the artistic director. He said, could I get a slot to audition for this? And of course they gave it to him. He was one of the staff bookkeepers. They wanted to do it as a courtesy. He went in, he was good, he got cast.
Wow.
So, you say that we try to tell kids, it's like, find a design medium you really love. And you'll be working in theater all along. I think of my colleague, many of our colleagues, Mark Christopher. Mark Christopher is designing artwork for Harbinger. Mark Christopher is regularly designing sets for Playhouse Stage Company. Mark Christopher is also working the regional circuit all across the country. And I point to him, hi, Mark. I point to him, to our kids all the time and say, if your bar for success, not dissimilar from people whose bar for what a piece of theater is, it's like, theater is only Broadway. Well, you're going to miss out on a lot of theater. And to you, the student actor, I say, if your definition of success is I want to be on Broadway, get ready for a life of disappointment, because while you may be wonderful, it's a numbers game. There are just only so many roles and there are so many actors. But if your definition is to have a working life in the theater, that is something that is achievable if you define your success correctly. And, Mark is someone who just wants to work in the theater. Yeah, he's got a survival job at a hospital in New Jersey, but I'll tell you, every year he seems to be doing it less and less. And he seems to be going out and taking more regional contracts to work as an actor and more design contracts and graphic design and all these things. And to me, not to make this like the Mark Christopher celebration, but that approach is huge. And I do think we need more designers and more technicians. And, that I encourage people, our students certainly, to try not to think of that work as separate from your work as an actor.
It's not a zero-sum game. Yeah. Right? Like, I love, next to acting and directing, I love doing sound design. Yeah. Sound design is literally a passion of mine. And if I never stepped on stage again or never directed another show, if I could keep doing sound design, I would feel very, very satisfied in the theater community. So I think that's the other part to remember, is that it's not a zero-sum game. It's like, you can pursue acting, you can pursue that side of it, but you can also find, maybe it's costumes, maybe there's something in passion.
It's a great
just the more you're in the world, the more you're a part of the world.
No question. Right. Our Heather's...
It's a great exercise for your brain as well. Like, you don't, if you were going to the gym, you working on your legs, and now you got to work on your arms or whatever those people do.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I hear that's what they do. But if you're thinking about the story through and telling the story with a different element, whether it's through scenery, costume, sound, lighting, that it unlocks, ways of thinking that you hadn't used before.
100%. It also just creates a greater respect for the overall craft sum total, right? It's like, I feel very differently after having these talks with students and giving them some insight into what it is that a lighting designer is doing sitting at the desk. It's a lot easier than to ask them to hold during a cue to cue. And it's like, you've been told what this person's doing. You standing still is not just an arbitrary request. They need time to do their work around you, So it's like, it just creates that greater respect for the craft once you open your eyes up to how much is. And that's another one of those wonderful things and I hope that the Capital Region Festival does this as well, is opens the general public's eyes up to how much goes into putting on a piece of theater. People are so, and I say this with no judgment, people have no idea. Your average audience member, because they're not thinking about it, they don't live in that world. They're just coming and enjoying a piece of live theater, and it's easy to take stuff for granted. But when you stop and you think, God, it took, in addition to the 20 some odd people on stage when we did Christmas Story, it's like, well, there were like 14 people backstage doing various things that you never saw because they went right. But if they had all gone wrong, you'd be very aware of how many people were back there screwing up, And I think that's important for people to understand, because it illuminates to them just how important their support is for the local theater. Making a $50 donation, a $20 donation, whatever it is, to whatever company you happen to be jazzed by that day, it makes a huge difference. It really does. We need that public support for what we do. And hopefully the festival helps to illuminate how much goes into each of these pieces.
I mean, there are people in my life who will not come to a show that I've directed, but will come to a show that I'm in. Right. And I don't know that I can make them understand that there's so much more of me and my heart and my passion in a show that I've directed than a show that I'm in.
100%.
But I get it, and I'm just happy you're coming. You know?
Yeah.
So, the show that you directed is Few Good Men by Aaron Sorkin, opening January 31st.
Yeah, I just did it because we have the same first name. That's all. That was the whole
Hey,
reason.
what is this thing with Aaron Sorkin? What does Aaron Sorkin do for you?
Boy, he's a writer who I've, really strongly responded to. Everybody remembers West Wing. For me, it actually goes back to this movie. The American President was also written,
Yeah.
a great movie written by Aaron Sorkin, with Michael Douglas and Annette Bening, and Sports Night is just such a great show. Such a shame that they put in that terrible laugh track. His work has always spoken to me, and I think it was about 15 years ago. I had the pleasure to direct the Farnsworth Invention at Albany Civic, which he wrote after West Wing, which was originally written to be a movie, and then he converted it into a play. And I just loved working on that show. That was another show with the big cast. So we're 17 people.
Wow, that
in
tiny
that
little
cast.
stage.
Yeah. They were packed in for sure. There is just something about his dialogue and his storytelling, that you can't stop listening to what people are saying. You know what I mean? There's just something about his dialogue that you are just honed in on it. You're just cued into what people are saying in a way that is unlike any other writer that I'm aware of, in terms of really being able to capture an audience with dialogue. And it is like, we talk about this a lot in rehearsals, is that it's like music. It's like there's a rhythm and a pace and a melody to his dialogue that you kind of have to try to find. And once you find it, it is the actors love speaking it, and I love watching the actors speak it. It's just great. It's just amazing.
It's exciting. And how great that you can create these opportunities. A lot of work creating
I am
creative license.
directing
But
a piece of work written by my favorite writer.
yeah.
It's nice.
That's a great thing.
Pretty cool.
You know, and I'm doing it with people who are extraordinarily good at what they do and passionate about this project. I mean,
And selling tickets.
And selling tickets.
Yep.
Our sales for the show have certainly surpassed anything that we've done previous to this at
Already.
the Music Hall.
Already.
Yeah.
That right? And we still have 3 weeks of sales to go.
Added a couple of Saturday matinees.
Couple
My
added
favorite
performances.
my favorite performances.
Yeah.
Saturday
Yeah.
matinees.
Right.
I can get out of class and get over there.
It's so funny because we talked about adding the Saturday matinee from the music hall's perspective for a bit, and I was very like, man, it's such a long day for the actors. And I was, I thought I was really being the advocate for my actors, and then I put it to them, and they were like, no, we want to do
totally
it.
wanna
We want to
do
do
it.
it. They were like, oh, we thought we were doing that anyway. Yeah. It's like, okay.
One of my favorite romantic feelings about the theater is grabbing lunch or something between shows. It's like I'm spending my day in the theater, which is like
great.
heaven.
It's great whether you're going to see 2 shows in a day or whether you're doing 2 shows in a day. Like that, that intermission between the shows, it is a romantic idea.
Yeah. Heather's coming up at Playhouse Stage. Now you have a season with your artwork that is based around musicals that came from movies.
Yeah.
Did that happen after we selected, or did we?
I would say little column A, little column B.
Yeah.
It was certainly
It's
not
like,
our
hey,
intention initially,
look.
but we started to realize, well, there's like a running theme here, and so why not embrace it? And so Heather's Christmas Story, which we just wrapped, which was a great success for us, and we were so happy that so many people came out to see it. That's as well known a movie to the point where it's played every Christmas for 24 hours on loop. It's as classic as you get, broadly classic, right? Heather's is about as culty classic as you get. It is a very strange movie from 1989.
I loved it too.
That could not be made.
Yeah,
today.
probably not in any kind of commercial way.
Yeah.
The way it was released, and it launched the careers of Johnny Depp and Winona Ryder to a large
Christian
extent.
Slater.
Excuse me, Christian Slater. And
I
Winona
think she was
Ryder.
dating Johnny Depp at the
Yeah,
time.
that
She
might
was.
be
They've
true,
done
actually. Yeah.
Edward Scissorhands.
Yeah.
You also get movie trivia on this podcast. This is great.
But yeah, it's to me the mark of a good musical adaptation of a movie is that it should enhance rather than distract from the story, the characters, the circumstances of the movie. I think we were having watched Christmas Story every day for a month. I think that the musical does that. It's the
absolutely.
parent's story is just greatly enhanced by these little musical interludes where you get to see what's going on for them emotionally. Heather's the same thing. The movie I think is kind of. It is such a strange film. It's such a stylized film in a way that the musical gets away from a little bit. The musical really does speak to the unfortunately the still fraught experience of going to high school when you feel different from the people around you, or when you feel like you have less than the people around you. That fraught experience and how cruel it can be, but ultimately too then how hopeful life at 17 can feel when you get past that. So we're really excited about it. That opens last week in February into the beginning of March. So at Cohoes Music Hall over the next month and a half, you got Aaron Sorkin and Lawrence O'Keefe. It's a pretty cool mashup.
Great. Awesome. Tony, we are at the time in the podcast when we talk about the play that changed my life.
Yes. Well, as I said, I wasn't really all that exposed to theater growing up, or, and it was when I was in college, I decided to do an apprenticeship at the Berkshire Theater Festival for a summer. And this was like total immersion in theater. It was an amazing experience. So you had classes. We worked on shows backstage. We worked in the carpentry shop or the costume shop, whatever it was, and we got to do some little shows of our own with a teacher that would bring these things together. But we were also in the Berkshires, and believe it or not, I was maybe 20. The first time I'd ever seen live Shakespeare. We went to Shakespeare and Company, and I saw Midsummer Night's Dream, and that was when they were still on the Mount.
One at the Wharton?
Yeah. And it was outdoors, and the fairies are running around in the trees.
And the pickup truck.
Yeah, and I just was like, I was absolutely blown away by it. It's funny, too, because there was somebody else in our group who was a lot more, seasoned with theater, and he was like, he's like, well, I had some problems with that production. I was like, I don't even know what you're talking about. I'm just like, my life has just been changed. Problems with that production. So it was great.
Awesome. That's a fantastic play that changed your life.
Yeah.
Thank you. Aaron.
Okay, yeah, so going back, going back to the On Golden Pond thing, after we had seen that and were so surprised that, oh, wow, you can actually see good theater, we decided to sort of expand, and we ended up going to see a play at Cap Rep. So I'm like 19, 20, and I used to get really bad migraines when I was younger. And I remember we went to the theater, and we sit down. I'll get to the name of the show. And I felt a migraine coming on. And I thought, oh, man, this is going to be terrible. they used to get really, really bad. And I was like, I remember saying to my friend, I said, we might have to cut out of here if this gets bad. And the show that we ended up seeing was Christopher Durang's Laughing Wild.
Oh, nice.
And so up until that point, much like you, I had done theater in high school, but all the theater I was exposed to in high school was things like I did You Can't Take It With You, Harvey, those classic 1930s big production plays and musicals, right? So that is what I thought theater was, full stop. And on Golden Pond, certainly, was more modern, but still kind of held to that same sort of, it's a unit set and the people come and go. And this being two people, and just being a two-person cast, a queer character, which 1991, right? I should say a queer character who was just a queer character, right? It wasn't a show about a gay character, right, right. So that completely messed with my head. But there was it takes place partly in a shop in a supermarket, and they had a rotating shopping aisle, right, that rotated in the middle of the stage, and so many things were happening in this very, very simple show that it just completely opened up my mind to what theater could potentially be. And it was so much more, how much imagination and how much creativity went into creating a piece of theater. That's when I really first understood it. And I was like, yeah, I think I want to do stuff like this.
Yeah.
This is fun. This is great.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah.
I'm gonna break the rules, and I'm gonna do two. All right. So the play that changed my life was actually a play during a soccer game, because I was a athlete growing up and wanted to go to college to play soccer, or at least I thought I did. I was a goalie, and during a game in my young teens, there was a breakaway, and as a goalie, someone comes at you with a breakaway, that your goal is just to make yourself as big as possible and get in front of that ball. And the young man who's running at me, his foot, as he went to kick the ball, direct contact with my left knee, broke my tibia tubular, and that put me down for 7 months. And that play did change my life, because it took me off the field and it started getting me thinking about other things. As luck would have it, 7 months later, when I rehabbed and went back and had my first game back, it was a rec game, and I broke the exact same bone in my right knee. And so then I really knew. But during that time, to talk about the actual play that changed my life, I love my dad a lot. And my dad, when he was in high school, had done theater. And he went to VI in Albany, right on Madison Avenue. And the brother who ran the theater program at the time said it was getting to be my dad's senior year, and they wanted to do Camelot. And he was like, you should audition for King Arthur. And my dad was like terrified to sing in front of people. He didn't want to. And even with King Arthur being as speak-singy, Richard Harris, right? It's as speak-singy as they get. But he didn't want to do it, and he never did it. My dad went to Siena, and when he went to like the student-run theater group, he like walked in and walked right out, because he felt like a fish out of water. So theater, he went into law, and he kind of performs in his own way, but he had always liked theater, but it wasn't a huge part of our lives growing up. But while I was hurt, he took me, here we are at OSM at Proctor's, he took me to Proctor's to see, this was probably like 1995, 1996, the national tour of Roundabout Theater's Carousel, which was one of maybe the first shows that Roundabout did on Broadway that then went out on the road. And I hadn't seen a Broadway style music. I'd never been to Broadway at that point. And seeing Carousel, which was a beautifully simple approach to that production, I was like immediately hooked. Went to FYE or whatever it was called back in the day at Crossgates, and bought the album, listened to it till it was like, raw, right? I mean, like run down. I really just absolutely fell in love with theater. And it's funny, relating to what you said, Tony, like when I think about like flaws in a piece, like it's so hard once you're in the theater, it's so hard to go and lose yourself and not be like nitpicking, not even nitpicking, but just like looking at it from the lens of like, I'm a theater maker myself. And 14-year-old Owen at that point was not a theater maker at all, and was able to just like take it in and be awash in this beautiful storytelling at Proctor's that day, and it genuinely changed my life. I never went back on the soccer field after that. After that summer, I never went back and played again. And instead,
I don't think your lower body can handle it.
Yeah, I was trying to tell you something there.
I don't think my upper body can handle it nowadays either, if I'm being honest. But it really did. It like that 1-2, right, of a soccer play leading to me going to see a play. Now here
Nice.
I am, and I'm very grateful to my father for that. It was just me and him that day. I was one of four kids that they had. He just took me because I was down for the count, and it was a great moment in my life.
It's great.
Thank you. That's fantastic. I left soccer and started performing, but not because of an injury. And I was a goalie, but no, I didn't. I was a junior, and I didn't make the varsity team. And I think the sophomore made the varsity team, and it was just too much. It was just.
I would just argue that you did it precautionarily, right? Because you can see what could happen.
You knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
Soccer's supposed to be safe.
Yeah. Well,
Maybe not.
theater was a safer non-contact sport.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I spent 13 years in the city, and when I moved home, I thought my life was over. And for all intents and purposes, because I had filled my life with theater in the city, and I thought, coming home, I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. And, I threw out my equity card and it was like I was going to get a job in retail, which I did.
Remember, you were at Borders, right?
Yeah,
I remember.
Yeah. The lost years. But I went to Albany Civic Theater and I saw Bob Gepfordt's production of All in the Timing by David Ives, and it was a cast of Doug Delisle and Richard Rowe and Michelle Sanders and Stephen Pelton, and I was just like, there is life. There is life after New York.
A lot of that life, I think, was attributed to Bob and Doug.
Yes.
Doug just brought so much real... I don't know. He just had such a sense of. I learned so much from Doug. I was lucky enough to cast Doug in my first production that I directed at Betty's Summer Vacation, and I just learned just because he was a cynical, funny, dark. You know what I mean? Guy,
Cultured,
but cultured, and he taught me the importance of not liking things. Right? He taught me the importance of being critical of things. That it's important to look at things and have a critical eye and just not sort of write everything off as everybody's doing such a great job.
Right.
Obviously there's a place for that, but he really taught me how to be to be a critical thinker, and I think that really played a big part in who I've ended up becoming.
A great impetus behind my wanting to create the Capital Region Festival of Theater is to save someone from that feeling of my life is over, that there is always life available, and especially in the Capital Region, we have so much, that you can tap into, whether you want to perform, attend, support, that there are so many ways that you can integrate theater into your life and enrich yourself and the community around us. I just think, and I think there are not many places like this in the country. I mean, we were talking earlier about someone from Pittsfield. He's in Tony's show.
Right.
And Berkshire Theater Festival, Barrington. They get coverage from the New York Times. But their community, the people who live in Pittsfield and Stockbridge, do not have the opportunity that we have to do, readings or to attend theater year round.
That's interesting.
That is quickly available to us, and by the score. You know, we have 100 theater companies. We have 22 high schools competing for the Jimmy Awards. We have 15 youth groups. We have 47 community theaters. We have 16 professional theaters. We have 8 colleges, 5 with theater majors.
So, you know, look, all of those stats being what they are, I would take it. I would take what you said and just put a slightly different twist on it. You said life after New York. You know, of all the things in my career that I wish I had done differently, I was very lucky when I first was in New York to found and run for about 8 years a company called Clockwork Theater, just with colleagues of mine that I'd gone to college with. We had similar philosophies. We felt really good about the work we did. We produced about 8 shows out of Theater Row on 42nd Street. And I'm proud of the work. But when I look back, I would have done it anywhere in the country other than New York City. And knowing what I know now, this would be a great place to try to start a company like that was doing the kind of work we were doing, and a welcoming place to start a company like that. And I'm sure you're finding that with Harbinger. You know, how many shows have you premiered already in the capital region? You're building an audience for it. You know, I think we all find that there is a welcoming community here. And, you know, New York City is thought of as the heart of the theater world because it is in many ways. It's the home of Broadway, right? There are thousands of paying regional nonprofit theaters in the country. Very few of them are in New York City. There are tens of thousands of community theater organizations and youth theater organizations, and the vast majority of them are located in zip codes outside of Manhattan, right? Sure. And so I just think that, you know, again, one of those things, not to keep going back to what I share with my students, but I would say to my students, New York is not the only option, far from it. If you want to work in the theater, there's a whole big world out there that you can set your sights on. And to the extent that we make our own opportunities, I wish I had founded that company with my friends somewhere other than New York, because it's so hard to break in there because there's so much oxygen being sucked up by Broadway and by the established companies that are already there. The capital region is fertile ground, even with all of the stats, the number of companies that's still fertile ground for continuing to build what our offerings look like here. You know.
Yep.
Berkshire Theater Festival, when I was there as an acting apprentice, a young man, and one of the teachers said something that I've never forgotten. It was along those lines. He said, "Look to your own backyard. Look to your own backyard."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And hope that it's not raining.
Tony Pallone, thank you very much, directing 100 Saints You Should Know at Schenectady Civic Playhouse, January 24th through
February 2nd.
Very
Groundhog Day. Groundhog Day.
What? So are you just going to keep doing the show over and
Oh
over
my
and
God.
over again?
We totally should. We'll see.
Aaron Holbritter, directing A Few Good Men by Aaron Sorkin
Yes.
at Cahoe's Music Hall, January 31st through
February 9th. 8 performances.
Owen Smith, artistic director of Playhouse Stage, who is presenting Heathers next at Cahoe's Music Hall.
The dates are like completely gone from my I'm pretty sure that it's like February 21st through March 4th. It's 3 weeks in February and March. I don't know.
Very good. And I'm Patrick White. Harbinger does not have a show until June. That will be at the wedding, June 6th through June 15th, which coincides with Pride Weekend and the Capital Region Festival of Theater.
Oh, yes.
Capital Region Festival of Theater coming to you June 12th through June 15th. It is going to be a blowout. There's going to be 4 days, 7 festival supported venues, many more to come, and culminating in a full day at UAlbany's Campus Center, where we'll have 20 events, performances, roundtables, workshops, classes, busking, who knows what. Thank you all for joining me. Mummenschanz, yes, crying
I wanna
toilet
bring back
paper.
Will they be here?
Yes.
Oh, I like
Yes.
moment shots. Yeah. Miss them.
I like it. Excellent. So thank you for joining us for the play that changed my life, and I'll see you in a theater soon.